right. First of all, thank you so much for being with me today. Two things you never get back are your time and energy, so when you give them, they're always an investment. Today, we're in the eye of the storm of climate action. What that means is we've had 7 years since the 198 parties, or nations, and the European Union signed what was called the Paris Agreement. It was an agreement that happened in COP28 2015, and it was attempting to make a difference to our world and our climate. A major part of that agreement was to keep the global temperature increase at no more than 1.5 degrees. And that means that is done through substantial reduction of global emissions such as CO2 and methane. As part of that agreement, there was a recognition of a requirement to have a global stocktake, or what is also commonly known within the COP28 as the GST. Now, this report is conducted typically every 5 years, and it's basically there to measure how far have we come as parties against the national determined contributions to mitigation and the national adaptation plans. The UAE took this moment of COP28 as a midway point to assess the efficacy of the Paris Agreement and ensure that any course correction is advocated within COP28. Some of you might not know what a COP is. COP is an acronym for the words Conference of Parties, and it is an annual political consensus-building process that brings all parties to work on climate agendas at a global scale. The first COP was conducted in 1995, and there have been 27 COPs since then, the last being in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Historically, these events only included government delegations at the national level. And there is a fully controlled space within these conferences that is called the Blue Zone. And typically, this is only allocated for government officials at the national level in order to support the progress against the Paris Agreement of 2015. Now, this Blue Zone area is actually monitored and controlled by the UNFCCC, or the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. We expect over 100 heads of state to attend COP28, and as you can imagine, it represents the culmination of a year's work, with the current presidency being with Egypt. On the 30th of November, the UAE will take over the presidency of COP28 till COP29 in November 2024. After COP21, the nations agreed that the solutions to climate cannot only be dependent on governments, but they must also include the private sector. And with this came the establishment of what is called the high-level champion, whose sole purpose is to ensure the engagement and participation of the private sector, NGOs, civil societies within the COP process. Now, don't get me wrong, the COP process includes negotiations, yes, but for these private sector organizations, it is completely focused on non-negotiated outcomes. And that happens within the green zone. Behind you, you'll see a map of the Expo City, signifying where the blue and the green zones will be. This is the first in the history of COP, where the green zone and the blue zone is separated by a silver line only, and not a distance of so long. And what we would like to see in the green zone is where all these private sectors and organizations will come together as a collective to really show force in their actions, projects, policies, and strategies for climate action. I'd like to really pause here for a moment and give you an opportunity to really understand the difference between the blue zone and the green zone. In the blue zone, you will find all the official heads of states, delegations, negotiation teams, working tirelessly to ensure that they move forward against the report that came out of the global stocktake. In the green zone is where we invite all other parties, meaning private sector, NGOs, universities, civil societies, to really participate in the climate action agenda. Some of you now might be wondering, why did the UAE decide to host COP28? To be honest, the evidence is overwhelming in terms of the UAE's track records in sustainability, and in assigning this year, 2023, as the year of sustainability. The UAE is a young nation that has been able to fast-track its economy and diversify. It was one of the first countries and nations to ratify the Paris Agreement itself in the region. and it has achieved what no other Arab country has achieved, and that is, it set up a space program and successfully completed a mission to Mars. This normally takes anywhere between 5 to 15 years to accomplish, and we did it in a record time like this, and knowing fully that we've never done anything like this before. Today, that program is sharing information with the world, and we have become a serious global player. The UAE was resilient. Even during the pandemic of COVID-19, we were one of the fast nations to overcome that strife and really show how, as the most advanced nation with technology, we're able to overcome that difficult period of our lives. Today, we have become one of the most advanced nations with digital services and adaptation of AI and the ability to truly fast-track any industry to be thriving and successful here in the UAE. The UAE has also invested over $50 billion in renewable energy, both domestically and internationally. And we intend to invest $50 billion more within the next decade. We are an ambitious nation and willing to take risks that will reap us the higher rewards that we seek. And as our motto goes, the UAE truly makes the impossible very possible. So as we move into the last week, next week is the actual start of the COP on the 30th of November, what has been the strategy of the presidency? So the COP28 President-designate, His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, launched his presidential action agenda as part of the COP28 strategy in July of this year. As a result of the GST report and based on his extensive consultations, which were one of the most intense and extensive in the history of COP, we have come up with 4 main pillars that we would like to focus all our efforts on, both in the blue zone and in the green zone. Firstly, we need to fast-track energy transition in a just and orderly way. What that means is we know that phase down of fossil fuels is both inevitable and essential, but it must be responsible. This also includes building the energy systems of the future while decarbonizing the existing energy systems of today. We all remember when the current president of the UAE addressed the World Government Summit in 2015, when he asked, and I quote, "In 50 years, when we might have the last barrel of oil, the question is, when it is shipped abroad, will we be sad?" And then he stated, "If we are investing today in the right sectors, I can tell you we will all celebrate at that moment." Secondly, we need to fix climate finance, which is a critical enabler of climate action and how we turn ambitions into reality. We are moving forward with the COP27, which achieved a major milestone in this regard, which is really bringing the light and delivery of the annual $100 billion commitment that the global North nations need to deliver to the global South. Thirdly, we need to focus on nature, lives, and livelihoods, and that is putting the planet and the people at the heart of the climate change process. We also need to ensure that finance will be necessary in delivering their ambitious missions across nature conservation, food, health, and supporting of vulnerable communities. We must also, above all, approach this matter by ensuring that nobody gets left behind. I'd like to pause here on a moment about a story. I've been to Fiji in the last couple of months, and I was sad to understand that they had actually entire islands drowning and being lost to the bottom of the ocean due to the rising sea levels. This means displacements of families, communities, need of new hospitals, education facilities, and that is truly the area that we have the most critical concern, which is the frontliners of the climate change. Lastly, we really believe in fostering inclusivity where everyone is welcome, because everyone is needed. We must mobilize for the most inclusive COP ever and formalize future participation in the climate action agenda. At COP28, inclusion to us means children, youth, women, elderly, people of determination, private sector, indigenous people, civil societies, NGOs, universities, and I'm not about to bore you, but the list could go on. COP28 has been instrumental in establishing and appointing the first youth climate champion, which is Her Excellency Sham al-Mazrou'i. As a presidency, we hope that this role will be formalized in the future COPs, whereby you will have 3 leadership principles: the president, the high-level champion that came out of the Paris Agreement in 2015, and the one that comes out of the UAE, which is the youth climate champion. We also need to both improve the process and the results of COPs to be more inclusive within future events. Against these, and over the course of this year, we have made some achievements. And these show major progress against many of these 4 pillars, but recognizes that more needs to be done. Let's take the first one. Our first achievement is the EU, African Union, Kenya, and G20 all signed up to our initiative to triple renewable energy. This covers about 85% of the global economy. But we need everyone on board, and we must also double energy's efficiency. Additionally, we've had over 30 national and international oil and gas companies have positively answered the call to step up and align on their net zero on or before 2050. And that includes zero out methane emissions and eliminate routine flaring by 2030. But we are counting on many more to come on board and start taking action to decarbonize further and faster. Thirdly, we've built consensus on the energy transition, and we've actually convened IEA dialogues to form joint understandings of what is needed to deliver a just and orderly transition. We have also partnered with the IRENA and Global Renewables Alliance to agree the critical enablers needed to meet our our goal of tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiencies. However, we need more countries to actually implement these recommendations that we've had consultations on. Fourthly, major economies have now agreed that the 100 billion needs to be delivered, and countries such as Germany have pledged 2 billion euros and the UK with $2 billion US. However, overall, the current level of the replenishment is neither ambitious nor adequate to meet the challenges of today, much less tomorrow. We've had financial reforms where the World Bank announced it would pause debt for repayments for poor countries hit by climate disasters. However, we need a thorough, full restructuring and reform of MDBs and IFIs in order to make climate finance more available, accessible, and affordable. Fifth, we convened a high-level expert group on climate finance to set out a crucial next step to reform international climate finance. However, we need leading institutions to come up with COP28, and provide recommendations and solutions with a definitive roadmap on how to implement these recommendations. As you can see, there is much that needs to be done, and every moment counts as we move closer to COP28. As I come towards the end of my session with you today, I'd like to leave you with a story my mother once told me about the late Sheikh Zayed, God rest his soul. And the story goes like this. During his time, he would travel with a small group of his entourage around the city of Abu Dhabi and Al Ain. It was his version of management by walking around, where he would visit his people. It so happened that on a specific day, he noticed on the road that there was a worker who was trying to pull up a palm tree that had fallen down. Now, as the president of the UAE at the time, he could have just driven by and that would have been the end of the story. However, he made it a point to stop, get out of his car, speak to this man, and help him with putting the palm tree upright. This confused me as a young girl, and for I wouldn't understand the meaning of the many learnings that this simple story had I not reflected on it in my later years. My question to you is, what did you learn from Zayed's story? We cannot wait for someone to fix the climate challenges for us. We can no longer look away what the science tells us. We borrow this earth from our children, who will inherit it from us. We see slogans that state there is no planet B. Many of you listening to me today have the power to make a difference to the systems, policies, operations that you run within your own respective organizations. You can create coalitions of major players within your industries to truly make a difference. The story of Baba Zayed shows many elements. It shows care, devotion, humility, leadership, this has been passed down to the DNA of the UAE national identity. In the UAE, we don't believe in just saying things, we make them happen. We contribute to solutions. We are mediators. We are facilitators. We are conveners and innovators. And we will stop at nothing to realize our leadership's vision and strategies. So what can you do based on what you heard from me today? I would say, come together as a group of people, as a group of organizations, unite, act through collective efforts, and let us deliver a world that is sustainable together for the future generations. And in the slogan of COP28, unite, act, deliver. Thank you. Thank you. Can you keep that with you? Sorry, thank you. Could you have the last slide on replay? It's on a loop anyways. If it's okay, do I have to stay on the stage? I'm happy to just walk around with everybody. Yeah? All right, brilliant. Please.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
First, I'd like to say thank you for your splendid presentation, and it's just one more example that women leadership is so important for just sort of meeting the targets of the Paris Agreement.
Yep.
But I would like to ask, there is obviously a big elephant in the room, which is still that the Arab countries and including the UAE is one of the biggest oil producers, and there is, you know, a big criticism which is going on the presidency of UAE of the COP28, and including on the things which is being sort of announced, including big criticism on the carbon capture. So my question is how you answer this criticism in a way, given the severe crisis we will face if we won't meet the Paris Agreement targets. And second, you said about 50 billion investments. What could you give some more flavor of what will be, well, the main sort of ways for what are the main sort of places where you are planning to invest? And basically you said about the inclusion, and the panel is called sort of unite the visionaries of the climate change. So how you specifically going to incorporate these views, including those who are not very aligned maybe with the views of the UAE? Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for those questions. I think I'd like to start with a story, if you'll allow me. And if we go back to 2009, there was a huge investment in what is now seen and perceived as one of the most interesting projects ever created in the region, which is Masdar City. Today, you have the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia looking at, for example, NEOM and creating that line that is going to be the most sustainable city. The UAE, I think, is very well positioned in terms of creating those avant-garde moments that lead others regionally who have similar economies to us or similar inputs into their economy as us, and really promoting this idea that we need to be more sustainable towards our planet, able to diversify in our economy, which we have done over the past 2 decades. Today, our GDP's contribution from oil is 30%. If we look at previous COPs, COP27, COP26, they all included countries that were oil exporters, and they have national and international oil companies. To me, the question is not about the criticism we hear from abroad. There's a very famous saying in Arabic, and I'll repeat it in Arabic and then I'll explain it in English. It says, "Al-kilabu tanbah wal-qafila tamshi." The dogs will bark, but the caravan will continue moving forward. With all due respect, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And the UAE has shown since 2009, where everybody in the region thought we were crazy, why are you investing in renewable energy? Why are you creating a sustainable city? What is it about this that we don't understand? And lo and behold, 2015 came around and the Paris Agreement was agreed. We were the first in the region to ratify that, to confirm that, yes, we agree to this. We had, at the time, our crown prince, he said, we want to wave this last barrel, very happy and very content with the investments we've made. Now, the investments. You have the Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park. You have the investments we've made in nuclear energy, which by UNFCCC standards is considered clean energy. There is a huge movement towards the appointment of His Excellency Dr. Sultan Al Jaber within our own national oil company to make us future ready, which means ADNOC will no longer be called ADNOC maybe in the future because it is an energy company. Yet, when we look at the geopolitical situations around us, we see nations going back to some of these traditional systems of energy, such as coal, because they have an energy crisis. It's a security issue. One of the most beautiful stories I've always loved to repeat is in front of His Excellency Dr. Sultan, he said, if they want us to cut it, close all the lights today, because that's what the systems that are based on are doing today. And what he is suggesting, which is very mature, is yes, we want to move away. We are already planning this as a country. The question is how and by when. And according to the Paris Agreement, it's by 2050. The UAE decided to bring that forward. We said no, 2030. We want to push these organizations to really invest, triple their investments in renewable energy. And I'm talking about these national oil and international oil companies. So that's the first question, and I hope that was enough in terms of a response. In terms of the flavor, so what is it that we're actually investing in? So obviously hydrogen is a big one. We're looking at how we can use CCS, or carbon capture and storage, to really support in the existing traditional energy systems and decarbonizing them, because the first pillar in the Paris Agreement is mitigation. Mitigation is all about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's CO2 or methane and the like. So the consultations that His Excellency has had have brought in rewards, but like you saw, there's still so much more that needs to be done. And the only way to do that is to put pressure from the government, so the governments need to come up with policies, and new governments or new countries that find new sources of traditional oil, they need to stop doing that. But it's a challenge of how much of their economy can they progress in light of that. You know, you think about renewable energy, it used to be so expensive 10 years ago. Today, it's a lot more cost effective. So it's looking at these technologies and systems that can really fast track and accelerate our progress. Now, about inclusion. In the COP itself, if you look at our website, there's a 12-day thematic. You'll notice a lot of these themes might be repetitive, such as energy, finance, but a lot of these themes are new. So health, trade, gender, youth, education. These are all new thematics that didn't exist in any COP before this COP. Additionally, the fact that we put the green zone and the blue zone right next to each other, again, never happened in the history of COP. We want that synergy between the two sides, the government and the non-government players. They have to talk to each other. You cannot continue to see one different than the other. You are complementary to each other. It's like ketchup and mayonnaise. You can have ketchup on its own, you can have mayonnaise on its own, but when it's together, tastes so beautiful, right? That's what we want to achieve, that mixture of government and non-government efforts that are synergized with each other and syncing with one another, complementary to one another, that really makes a difference to the climate action agenda. So it's not one person signing off on something, it's a collective. COP is a consensus building process. And even His Excellency Dr. Sultan in multiple occasions said, we need to innovate in this process because it's taking too long. And you know the UAE is all about fast, fast, fast. We've done so much in 50 years, and we hope that that spirit and that DNA will transfer to the parties and really build that trust in the process and accelerate it. Thank you for your question. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry. I'm from climate change, rechange. Yes. See, my question is, we have corporates here, they're giving this annual financial audits. Can we have any data of their emission data audit? And the government have any proposal for them to declare their emission data and flag up it and flag down? So it can be good for the public to know that.
The gentleman's statement was looking at not only their financial records of private sector organizations, but really focusing on what else can they report on that is climate change related that would really add value? Two things come to my mind in that statement. Number one, the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment in the UAE has launched its own net zero or UAE climate change pledge. And the idea of that pledge is to get as many of these organizations, number one, aware of what it means to be sustainable in your operations, in your policies, in your finance, in your systems, but then two, reporting against those, right? So it's always looking at the idea of accountability. Honestly, I'm hoping that this year will be what I call a jump start to organizations in the UAE, especially in the private sector, to really start reforming their systems, their processes, their policies, to really be aligned with the, for example, the Race to Net Zero initiative or the Paris Agreement mitigation pillar. Because honestly, at the end of the day, like I said, if these companies don't join and be part of the solution, they will continue to be part of the problem, which is not what we want, which is why we talked about inclusivity. Everybody has to be involved to be part of the solution. I don't want anybody outside singing like they're the problem. Thank you.